Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the second session of the special lecture series organized by KIIT School of Languages. Now, this session is titled Critical Thinking and its Relationship to Literary Analysis, and this will be delivered by Dr. Paritosh Chandra Dugar. It gives me immense pleasure to welcome Dr. Dugar to the KIIT School of Languages. Dr. Paritosh Chandra Dugar has taught English language and literature to the undergraduate and postgraduate students for 38 years at various government colleges of Rajasthan. He obtained his master's in English in 1976 from Udaipur University, now Mohanlal Sukhadia University, Udaipur. He holds a doctorate in American literature. His main areas of interest are mysticism, rhetoric, English language teaching, critical thinking, and creative writing. Dr. Dugar is a recipient of Olive I. Reddick Prize, that's the Best Dissertation Award of American Studies Research Center, now OUCIP, Hyderabad. He has participated in various international conferences as a plenary speaker or resource person in India, Nepal, Thailand, and the Philippines. He has authored several books and published research papers in leading national and international journals. He has also contributed short stories and feature articles to the Times of India and Indian English Daily. He has been a subject expert at the Rajasthan Public Service Commission and a textbook writer for the Board of Secondary Education, Rajasthan. After his retirement as a principal of a government postgraduate college in Rajasthan, Dr. Dugar worked as a managing editor of 4 research journals published by Pacific University, Udaipur. He is an internationally published writer of flash fiction and a winner in 2 international flash fiction writing competitions. So welcome, Dr. Dugar, and we are really eagerly waiting for your session. So over to you, sir.
Thank you, Debanjali. Thank you so much. First of all, I would like to thank the Dean, Faculty of Humanities and Research, Professor Beerendra Pandey, and the Department of English, the School of Languages of KIIT, for inviting me to talk to you on this topic, critical thinking and literary interpretation. My discussion of the topic hinges on 4 pairs of integrands. In mathematical terminology, we can call them pairwise distincts. In pairwise distincts, is a technical term. In pairwise distincts, each pair of elements consists of 2 different things. What is interesting about such pairs is that though things are different from each other, they are significantly related to each other in terms of their mutual dependence, usefulness, and relevance. And the 4 pairwise distincts I'm going to talk about in the present context are: number 1, critical thinking and literary interpretation. That is very much the topic of my talk today. And the second pair of distincts is questioning and thinking. And the third is ends and means. And the fourth is why and how. Now, interestingly, the 4 pairs themselves can be paired together. For example, the pair number 1, that is critical thinking and literary interpretation, can pair with the pair number 2, that is questioning and thinking. So both the pairs, both the distincts are related to each other. There is an interrelatedness among the pairs themselves. And the pair number 2 and the pair number 3 pairs with pair number 4. That is ends and means, go with why and how. So I'll be talking about these pairs and their interrelatedness And then I'd be trying to show you, or rather demonstrate, how critical thinking skills can be applied to critical interpretation, or a literary interpretation or literary analysis of a text. Critical thinking and literary interpretation are two different things in nature. Critical thinking involves reasoning, use of logic, and the exercise of the intellect. It is objective in nature and demands objectivity in approach. On the other hand, literary interpretation is essentially an exercise focused on products of author's imagination, involving emotions and feelings of the author or the characters created by them. The creative process is essentially subjective in nature. Now look at that, as I said in the beginning, they are different in nature. Critical thinking is one thing. Is one thing. It is it is reasoning. It is related to intellect. Whereas literature or literary interpretation is related to emotion and feelings. The creative process, is related to emotions and feelings. The creative process is therefore essentially subjective in nature, yet paradoxically, as soon as a literary artifact or literary creation comes into existence, it becomes an object, and then it needs to be looked at objectively for an accurate understanding and valid evaluation of its meaning. No doubt, we as readers bring our own experiences, knowledge, assumptions, and biases for its interpretation or meaning making. Yet, our inferences about the text cannot be treated as valid unless we are able to support or substantiate them with facts and evidences from the text itself or from the outside world. Thus, we are required to make an objective, close reading of the text. And precisely, we need therefore to think critically for an authentic critical reading of the text. Critical thinking, in my view, is an effective means by which we can make a reliable, close reading of the text. The greatest benefit of teaching critical thinking skills, therefore, to our students for literary analysis is that it will enable them to become independent thinkers and independent evaluators of literary texts. And I think that is the basic, that is the very basic aim of education. It is a sad fact, of course, that our students depend mostly on others' understanding, especially that of their teachers or the so-called past book writers, in their attempt to understand the meaning of the text. And regrettably, literary interpretation has become mostly a second-hand reading business or reading affair for most of our students, and pardon me, for many of our teachers as well. So, critical thinking, therefore, about the second pair I'm going to talk about now. I'm going to focus on the second pair. The second pair is that of questioning and thinking. Most people don't find any difference between the two. Questioning is simply regarded as a form of thinking. Yet for a lot of people these days, questioning could be abstaining from thinking. Consider how many times and how many of us send questions to Google or Wiki to save ourselves the trouble of thinking to get the right answers. Instead, we seek ready-made answers from such sources like Google and Wiki. But when questions are posed to us, or we pose questions to ourselves, the scenario changes. Then the questions, hijack our mind and force us to think. And that is why I must say that questioning stimulates thinking. The thinking is stimulated by questioning. So we must be able to question. May I now come to the next pair, the third pair, the pair of ends and means. The difference between the two is obvious. Yet more obvious is the fact of their interrelatedness. We know that means is something by which we achieve something, some goal, some end. Here, critical thinking is the means and literary interpretation is the end. Now, related to this pair is the pair of the two question words. The fourth pair, which I mentioned right at the outset, the pair of why and how. Now, though they are different from each other, they are used to serve the same purpose. They are used as a means to achieve an end. They are they in fact serve as tools with which we can dissect a literary text for searching underlying meanings. The other question words like what, where, and what, when, and where are also important. But why and how can lead us to a close reading of the text for deeper and alternative meanings. Now, let me go back to the topic. Let me focus again on the topic, that is critical thinking and literary interpretation. So far, I was trying to clarify the background. And now let me come back to the topic, the proper. Critical thinking and literary interpretation. This going back, my going back to the topic might seem a bit of a repetition, but I think it is necessary for my taking you to a practical demonstration of how critical thinking can be used for a valid critical reading of a literary text. Now, so far as thinking is concerned, now let me elaborate a little on the concept of critical thinking itself. Now, so far as thinking is concerned, everyone does it. It is very much part of human nature. We cannot live without thinking. Even lunatics also think. Even mentally retarded persons think. So thinking is very much part of our life. Now, we are all born to think. But the question is, how well do we know how to think? How well do we know how to think? Quite often, our thinking left to itself is biased, distorted, partial, prejudiced, uninformed, and unfocused, tending to degenerate into daydreaming or worrying most of the time. It is not a disciplined thinking, I must say, in nutshell. This may not be the case with you, with teachers, but sadly enough, but it is certainly so with many of the students. So critical thinking is basically aimed at teaching ourselves and our students how to think rather than what to think. In short, critical thinking is self-directed, self-disciplined, self-monitored, and self-corrective thinking. It involves developing and employing certain thinking skills and intellectual standards and dispositions. Now, Michael Scriven and Richard Paul, who have done massive work on critical thinking, and who also, run a website on critical, exclusively devoted to critical thinking. So I want to quote them here, how they define critical thinking. So Michael Scriven and Richard Paul have offered a more comprehensive definition of critical thinking. According to them, critical thinking is the intellectually disciplined process of actively and skillfully conceptualizing, applying, analyzing, synthesizing, and or evaluating information gathered from or generated by observation, experience, reflection, reasoning, or communication. As a guide, this is meant, what is the aim of it? As a guide to belief or action. So our belief or action has to be guided by our thinking, and that thinking has to be disciplined. That has to be self-monitored. We must watch our thinking. Many a times we do not watch our thinking. We generalize things, We jump to hasty generalizations. We commit a lot many fallacies when we talk about things. So that kind of fallacious thinking or hasty thinking or undisciplined thinking is not critical thinking. This is what I want to talk about. So, uh, the in fact, this definition is based on Benjamin Bloom's taxonomy of different cognitive skills or domains of thinking. Benjamin Bloom also has worked a lot on critical thinking, and he has developed a whole hierarchy of the levels of thinking. Lower level of thinking, lower order of thinking, higher order of thinking. So uh, I'm going to talk now about Benjamin taxonomy of different cognitive skills or domains of thinking, like remembering, understanding, applying, analyzing, evaluating, and creating. The first three of these, that is uh, remembering, understanding, and applying, these three, the first three of these types of thinking are categorized as lower order thinking skills, because they are simply the abilities to recall facts or information, while the next three, that is that is analyzing, evaluating, and creating. These three, these three are recognized as higher order thinking skills. I will be mostly concerned with these the next three higher order thinking skills, as they are the abilities to break the whole into component parts to make inferences and draw conclusion. So once we break the whole into component parts to make inferences and draw conclusions, it is called analysis. So in critical analysis of a literary text, this is our first exercise. We break the component, the whole text into component parts. So this is analysis. And then uh, the second one is to use old ideas to create new ones using information from a variety of sources, and that is synthesis. And the third one is to make judgments, explain reasons for judgments, compare and contrast information, and develop reasoning using evidence from relevant sources, and that is evaluation. So besides these skills are important, but besides these skills, there are intellectual standards to be applied to thinking. And these are clarity, accuracy, precision, relevance, depth, breadth, and logic. Now, in order to be a skilled critical thinker, one needs to inculcate certain intellectual traits, virtues, or dispositions like intellectual humility, intellectual courage, intellectual empathy, intellectual autonomy, intellectual integrity, intellectual perseverance, confidence in reason, and fair-mindedness. These are intellectual dispositions which a skilled critical thinker is required to develop. But they will not develop overnight. It needs practice. But by practicing these things, one can become, in real sense, a critical thinker and a very good and an expert evaluator of literary text. So intellectual, now let me clarify what these terms mean. Intellectual humility means having a consciousness of the limits of one's knowledge. He should be able to admit, to confess his limitations. This much humility one must have. And then by intellectual courage is meant a consciousness of the need to face and fairly address ideas, beliefs, or viewpoints towards which we might be having strong negative emotions. We should be able to entertain, we should be able to accept, we should be able to welcome the ideas, the ideas, the emotions, the viewpoints with which we do not agree. We should be open-minded. That is the idea. And having a consciousness of the need to imaginatively put oneself in the place of the other is intellectual empathy. Now, this is not an easy thing. If someone is suffering and you put yourself in his place and you feel the same kind of suffering yourself, that is empathy. So one has to have empathy also as a required, one of the required dispositions of a critical thinker. So intellectual, and then comes intellectual autonomy. Intellectual autonomy involves having rational control of one's beliefs, values, and inferences. Intellectual perseverance. Intellectual perseverance implies having a consciousness of the need to use intellectual insights and truths in spite of difficulties, obstacles, and frustrations. Now, confidence, that the word itself, is self-explanatory. So confidence that in the long run, one's and humankind's higher interests will be served by giving freest play to reason is confidence in reason. Actually, this is confidence means confidence in reason. And fair-mindedness means having a consciousness of the need to treat all viewpoints alike without reference to one's own feelings or vested interests. Now, the question is, and a very big question is, how can we learn critical thinking skills? And the most effective method of developing and using critical thinking skills, as most CT scholars, they say critical thinking scholars, believe, is by questioning. Now, questioning in this context involves asking pertinent questions that serve as prompts, leading us to acquire particular types or levels of critical thinking skills. For example, questions such as how many characters are there in the story? Questions like how many characters are there in the story? Another, what is happening in the story? Another, what lesson do you learn from the story? These questions, these types of questions take us to the skills of remembering, understanding, and applying respectively. The first three critical thinking skills. Now, the questions such as how are the actions or speeches of the characters related to the main idea of the story? Or do you like or dislike the story? And if you like, why? And if you dislike, why? And another question like, can you write another story using the same characters? These types of questions, they bring us to the skills of analyzing, evaluating, and creating respectively. So, the whole thing depends on the type of questions we ask to our students and to ourselves when we sit down to evaluate or sit down to analyze a literary text. So, however, there is yet a more useful model of city skills developed by Adams and Ham in 1990. Now, so far, I talked in general about critical thinking skills and the types of questions and a model, but there, to me, there seems to be a much better model than that, even much better than Benjamin Bloom's, and that is of Adams and Ham. Adams and Ham developed this model in 1990, and I regard this model more useful in the context of literary interpretation, especially in literary interpretation. I think it is more expedient and practical in terms to the task of literary interpretation. So this model, consists of these skills. One, focusing skills. That is aimed, focusing skills are aimed at identifying and recognizing a problem. Number two is information gathering skills, which are meant for obtaining information, forming questions, and clarifying issues. And the third one is remembering skills, which are intended for information storage and retrieval. And yet another skills are organizing skills, which are aimed at comparing, classifying, and ordering information. And the next skills are analyzing skills, which help us classify and examine information and relationships. And another type of skills are generating skills, which are employed for applying prior knowledge to add information beyond what is given. And other skills are integrating skills, which help us in solving, understanding, forming principles, and creating compositions. And lastly, evaluating skills, which enable us to assess the reasonableness and quality of ideas, such as establishing criteria and verifying data. Now, having explained so many things related to critical thinking skills, I come to demonstrating the application of critical thinking skills to literary interpretation through the example of a short story, that is an example of a flash fiction story. A literary interpretation involves literary analysis, which means an analysis of various components of a literary text, such as character, plot, theme, and narrator, etc., etc. We are all aware of it. There is nothing, to explain more about it. So in a literary text, character is important, plot is important, narrative technique is important, themes are important. So for the present purpose, because I do not have, a long span of time available to me, I would like to concentrate or focus on only one thing, that is character, only one component, only one feature of a literary text, which applies to all literary texts, that is character, which applies even to a genre like poetry sometimes. So for the present purpose, let me focus on character, which contributes significantly to plot as well as theme of his story. So, character is so important. It is related to the other features of a literary text. Here, an analysis of linguistic features of the text may prove most useful in analyzing and understanding the character or characters of the story, as an interpretation of character includes an observation or explanation of his or her appearance, speech, behavior, and the commentary of other characters or the narrator himself or the author himself sometimes. Apart from the character's own speeches and the commentary of other characters, the linguistic investigation can be applied to the study of a character's appearance and behavior as well. So let us first now look at the story. The title of the story is A Human Alien. Now, this is quite paradoxical, how can a human being be alien? Anyway, there is something to it, that a literary evaluator has to find out, an interpreter has to find out. And let me tell you, I'm being very frank about it. This is my own story. As Debanjali, in an introduction to me, pointed out that I'm a flash fiction writer, and I've published many of my stories from outside of India, from UK and America. So I thought that I should choose this story. This is a very, very short story. And I particularly find it quite, useful in elaborating my points. So let me begin this story. Hey, who are you? You look like a human being and speak a human language, but we doubt you are one of us. The cops of the militia Earth started interrogating him. True, in his basic anatomy, he did not appear different from them. Yet, his height and regular facial features set him apart and made him an object of doubt and investigation. The corpse's questioning continued. Where do you live? On the earth, sir. Your name? Mark Honest, sir. What's your work? Sir, I'm a teacher at Fearless School. Your exact annual income? Sir, $70,000 per annum. Any crime record? Yes, sir. What? Once I stole my girlfriend's gold necklace, sir. What happened then? Nothing, sir. The girl didn't complain. She loved me, sir. Okay. What's your politics? None, sir. What's your ethics? Sir, if I borrowed money from my friend, I would return it before his first reminder. Who did you meet first on entering the precincts of the city? Sir, I met a bleeding man on the road. I took him to hospital where you copped me. Now, immediately, his answers, that is Mark Honest's answers, were transferred to Galactor, the computer of the galaxy, for processing. A minute later, on the screen flashed, no plagiarism, all statements found true. The cops reported the outcome to their seniors. Promptly, a committee was constituted to discuss the issue and take a decision. On the third day, the chairman of the committee announced, the captive is not a human being. He is an alien. Tomorrow, he'll be transported to Galactic Lab for a genetic investigation. The story is over. So this is a small story, and there are dialogues. Now, if we go to the first three types of questions, the low order questions, how many characters are there? It is very easy to say. One is Mark Honest, then there are soldiers, then there is a committee, then there is the chairman, and all that. What are these characters? What is happening in this story? Okay. The man Mark Honest, is being questioned, is being interrogated by cops, by soldiers of the militia earth, and such things. These are lower order skills. There is nothing very important about it. But the students will learn to apply focusing skills, because I am using that model, model of Ham, Allen and Ham. So first, students will learn to apply focusing skills. The critical thinking questions posed by the teacher will make them focus on particular linguistic features and trigger their analytical thinking about those features. Now, these questions could be, what particular words or sentences draw your attention? Now, this requires a bit of imagination also, and focusing. Now, the student has to go over the whole story again, and he has to focus at each and every sentence in the story to see which words particularly were attention catching for him or her. Another question could be, what do you notice about the vocabulary, sentence structures, and spellings? Anything striking about these things, about words? Yes, there are words in it which has attention catching, which the student may not have heard before. What particular words or sentences draw your attention? And what do you notice about the vocabulary, sentence structures, and spellings? Such questions, they will trigger the students' focusing skills. Now, in reply to these questions, the students might point out the use of coined words in the story, the use of nameless characters, the types of sentences, long, short, incomplete sentences, and lack of figurative language. Next, students will learn to apply information gathering skills that will help them select relevant linguistic features in their character's language. They might notice that only one of the three characters in the story has a name, and which the character himself reveals during the interrogation. That the man under interrogation, named Mark Honest, uses sir at the end of each of his answers. That the language of Mark Honest is extremely simple, free from any figurative features or embellishments. Not a single adjective is used by him, and that most of Mark Honest sentences are grammatically complete, and that Mark Honest sentences are free from any ambiguity, equivocation, or circumlocution which we can expect from people who are being subjected to police interrogation. He doesn't mince words. He doesn't manipulate words. He gives answers, straight answers, frank answers, straightforward answers to each and every question. Then students will employ analyzing skills to examine syntax and figurative language, if there is, that they choose as significant in the character study. Now, they may be prompted to answer such general questions as what kind of sentences does the author use? Simple, compound, or complex? Now, all these things, mean a lot. If the author is using is a simple sentence, it has symbolic meaning. It has some meaning. An author doesn't do anything without any intention. It is all intentional. Everything is calculated, deliberate, intentional. I don't know which authors, they write in dreams and then note down. In that case, you cannot call it intentional. Otherwise, this is my firm view that everything is designed in the text. And the design is executed by the author. So that is why I'm saying everything is deliberate. Simple, compound, or complex. What types of sentences? And what is their syntactical pattern? In response, students might point out that where most sentences of cops interrogating Mark Honest are short and syntactically less complete, the sentences of Mark Honest are comparatively longer and more complete. Look at the difference. The cops, they don't bother about these things. Whereas Mark Honest is trying to be honest in his responses. That is why he is using full sentences, complete sentences. The author does not use any figurative language in the entire story. Now, the next, students will use generating skills, that is connecting, inferring, and elaborating upon ideas already discussed to elucidate the character. The teacher can pose questions like, why does the author use this type of language? To elicit students' responses dealing with the character's personality, level of intelligence, and beliefs. In response to this question, students might on the basis of their analysis, the foregoing analysis, which they have already performed, they have already done, you know, they might describe Mark Honest as a plain, simple, frank, straightforward, patient man. On the basis of linguistic features, on the basis of sentences he speaks out, on the basis of answers he gives to cops, they can, by applying, you know, that knowledge, they can infer that Mark Honest, the character, yeah, they can describe the character of Mark Honest. Very simple, straightforward, upright, morally upright. He is honest and morally upright. He is fearless. He is fearless. His straight answers to cops' questioning emphasize this fact. His simplicity is evident from his simple, unostentatious language. Yet he is treated as an alien. Now, this is a very important question. Yet he is treated as an alien, not as a human being. Thus, the other characters, including the cops and the chairman of the committee, come into a direct contrast with Mark Honest. Now, by implication, you know, if Mark Honest is so straightforward, honest, this and that, then those who are questioning him, we can doubt their character. They may not be so honest. They may not be so straightforward. They may not be so morally upright. So, yeah, thus the other characters, including the cops and the chairman of the committee, come into a direct contrast with Mark Honest. Their sentences characterize them as mechanical in their attitude. They are more or less like robots. They lack human warmth, and they have a gross, you know, disregard for human virtues like honesty, simplicity, love, pity, etc. To them, mind my words. I'm going to make a very important point here. To them, these virtues, honesty, simplicity, love, pity, etc., these virtues are strange things. And therefore, they treat Mark Honest as an alien. Look how ironical it is. Finally, students will apply evaluating skills to verify their conclusions about Mark Honest and other characters. They will search in the text for further examples of the personality traits and investigate how other literary features like tone, the speeches of other characters, and the narrator's commentary contribute to the creation of the images of characters in the story. Here, students might refer to the narrator's comment about the appearance of Mark Honest and infer how his height and regular facial features are symbolically consistent with his moral stature, simplicity, and uprightness. If, according to the narrator, Mark Honest's height and regular facial features do not match with those of the cops, it implies that the cops have distorted features, which could be symbolic of their unhealthy and corrupt behavior and thought. So finally, I would like to say, I would like just to have to pose a rhetorical question. Have we not been trying to so far, you know, throughout this discourse, have we not been trying so far through the use of critical thinking skills to answer the questions? Number one, how does the author delineate a character in the story through language? And number two, why does he delineate the character in this or that way? So we come to last pair, how and why. Thank you so much. It's over, sir.
Um, Thank you so much, sir. Thank you so much for your wonderful presentation. I would now request the participants who are the students of undergraduate and postgraduate courses of KIIT School of Languages and others who are present in this session to direct your questions and comments to sir.
Welcome.
You may also write, if you are comfortable, you may also write in the chat box, which I can read. I would request the undergraduate and the postgraduate students to direct your questions if possible or comments. Okay. Sir Nazia, who is a student of our undergraduate course, sir, she has thanked you and she has written, "Thank you, sir. The lecture was really insightful and helpful with the example you gave." So,
I thank you, Nazia, for your compliments. Any other question or query or suggestion? Most welcome.
sir, Shweta also thanks you for the insightful and beautiful session.
Welcome.
I would request the audience, if you want to direct your questions or comments directly to sir, you may unmute yourself and you can have a word, or if you are comfortable, you may also type in your query or your comment in the chat box, which I would be more than happy to read. So Ranjita, who is our postgraduate student, so she also thanks you for providing a very clear vision on critical thinking.
Thank you.
Okay. Okay, sir. So thank you so much for the presentation. So this was okay, sir. So Shatabdi, who is our postgraduate student, so she has a question for you. So
Yeah.
her question is: considering the world to be a text, do you think questioning and analyzing could indeed break societal norms and traditional frameworks to give voice and place to newer forms?
Please, would you please repeat this question?
Sure, sir. So she has asked that considering the world to be a text, do you think questioning and analyzing could indeed break societal norms and traditional frameworks to give voice and place to newer forms?
Yeah, certainly, certainly. Actually, this question is a very intelligent question. And critical thinking, in fact, has to be applied to the whole world in our day-to-day, social interactions. And most of the, social relationship casualties, happen due to this lack of critical thinking in families. Social relationships break because of our lack of understanding the issues and the problems correctly. Because we lack disciplined thinking, we are unable to judge things in the right way. So, but there is another thing, um, it will certainly lead to a better world, to better society. It will break. It may break the established notions. It may break the established norms. But if you find those norms, biased or unhealthy or detrimental to society, to the life of people, or to the social well-beings of people, then certainly they must be rejected. But in order to find whether they are really irrelevant or relevant, you have to be a critical thinker first. You have to be a critical thinker. If you are a blind follower of established norms, traditions, then you may not be able to break them, even if they are wrong, even if they are fallacious. And there are so many. And there is yet another, her question, is so intelligent. I need another 1.5 hours to speak on this. And
I would really agree with you on that, sir. It is a very it's a question which requires a lot of insight and a deeper probe into the very consideration of the world as a text itself. So, thank you so much for answering this. Shatabdi, I think that more or less addresses your question.
Yeah, ma'am, certainly. Thank you so much, sir.
Shatabdi, your name is very symbolic, you are talking about the whole Shatabdi.
Thank you, sir.
Sir, we have got a question from our colleague, sir, Dr. Pramod Kumar Das. Sir, Dr. Das has asked how critical thinking skills can be enhanced from peer learning experience.
Peer learning experience, okay. By applying these skills which I mentioned in my discourse. This is the only answer, by applying these skills. You have to practice these skills. And you have to analyze that, the conversation with your peers. And so many times we make hasty generalizations about people, about our own friends, about our peers. If something, he does something and we just say, no, he's bad, I must reject him, I must break up, and this and that. But that is hasty, and you have to be fair-minded. You have to accept their point of view also. You have to, you should be open-minded. So by learning to be open-minded and fair-minded, you can learn through your interaction with your peer groups. Yes, by applying the same skills.
Thank you so much, sir. So then there is another question from another of our postgraduate student, Emmanuel Komugisha. So he has asked, sir, how would you apply the skill of analyzing, that's breaking the text into smaller components, to a bigger text, let's say a novel?
Yeah, that can be done, no doubt. I don't know why he's asking this question. There are characters, there are the plot, character, themes. These are the components,
Okay, thank you, sir. Emmanuel, I hope that answers your question. Emmanuel, if you're there.
Does he have anything other any other thing in his mind?
Sir, I am Emmanuel. If this is, if you are there, if you could respond. Sir, maybe not. So then we have our Dean, sir, Dr. Pandey. Sir, he has asked, they say that critical thinking is separating wheat from the chaff. Would you clarify this statement?
Beef, what is that?
Sir, wheat from the chaff. They say that
Yeah,
critical.
yeah, it's an intelligent observation. Thank you, Pandey sir, for this. He has put it in a very literary way. That is true, yes, that is correct, correct, very much correct.
Sir, this is our undergraduate student, Prithvish. Sir, he also thanks you and says that it was really an informative session.
Thank you.
Okay. So if we do not have any other comments or questions, can we move towards an end? Dean, sir, shall we? Dean, sir, you are not audible. Sir, shall we move towards the end? Or would you like to?
There are no more questions. We can wind up.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much. So
before we wind up, I am especially very especially thankful to Professor Beerendra Pandey to have taken up such a relevant, such a significant, and which it has become more significant in today's world where we have such an explosion of information, a continuous bombardment of fake information from all around the world, from all around the sources, digital sources, media, electronic media, and political demagogues, demagogues. They speak all kinds of nonsense things to us, and they try to brainwash us, and they make us clap,
That's why I asked separating
yeah,
wheat
so
from
I
chaff.
thank you. I thank you very much. You deserve huge thanks, for having taken up such a very significant, useful, relevant topic for discussion. And I hope it should continue. I mean, I request you to continue discussion on critical thinking. And if it is not a part of your course, please do think of incorporating it in your courses. Thank you, sir. Thank you very much.
thank you, Dr. Dugar. And on behalf of KIIT School of Languages and KIIT Deemed to be University, I thank you once again. I extend my sincere gratitude for taking out time and for delivering this presentation, this wonderful lecture to all our students and all the participants over here. Before we end the session, so this was a special lecture series which was organized by KIIT School of Languages, focusing on the role of critical thinking in academics. And during the course of the discussion with the first session that we had with Dr. Pandey, where he stressed on the importance of critical thinking, and by taking on examples on how to craft an answer, to address an answer which is a very problematic area, I must say, especially for our students. So he addressed those with examples and gave them a direction to think and apply critical thinking through by giving a proper direction to all our students. And in session 2, we had a wonderful discussion by examples on how to apply critical thinking in literature itself, and a wonderful discussion about it. So I would like to thank both the speakers and making the entire day such a beautiful one, such a lovely one, I must say. So thank you, sir. Thank you, Dr. Dugar. I would like to thank all the participants who have been with us for both the sessions. Without you, honestly, this lecture series would, it has no meaning. So I would extend my thanks to each and every one of you. Mostly I can see my students and my colleagues over here. So I would be thanking each and every one of you. I would like to thank the school administration with special mention to the academic coordinator of KIIT School of Languages, Dr. Sahil Mohammad Dilabul Hussain, who is not present with us at this moment, but he sends his wishes and regards. I would also like to thank the Deputy Director of the KIIT School of Languages, Mr. Samir Kumar Das, for arranging. I would also like to thank the office staff and each and every one of my colleagues, with special mention to Professor Tanmay Putatunda and Dr. Gaurav Chatterjee for hosting this session, for recording this session, and for providing me this beautiful space to engage in a discussion with all of you. And on that note, I wish you all a very happy weekend, and thank you all. Hope to meet you again very soon.
Thank you, sir.